Hi, my name is Stu Sneidman, and this is Drew Winget from Stanford University, and we are here to talk and show Mirador, and I was really thrilled to see the presentations in the morning. There were a couple of references to Mirador. Tom teased with a little teaser, and now we'd like to kind of give you a sense of where we are today. I do want to take a moment to provide some context, kind of reinforce and reassert some of the motivating factors behind this particular piece of software that takes advantage of the image and presentation APIs. A couple weeks ago, I had the good fortune of being at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam for a conference on imaging, and was lucky enough to get a look at the late Rembrandt exhibit. And I really marveled at the amount of work it takes for a museum like the Rijksmuseum or the National Gallery or many of the other great museums in the room to assemble all those pieces of art that are distributed around the world, drawings and versions, and bring them together in one place. And I was mindful that I was coming to the National Gallery. Itself has a very impressive collection of 17th century Dutch art, and thinking about some of the other great museums around the world that have paintings by Rembrandt and his contemporaries, and the challenges or the opportunities for art historians and admirers to virtually experience these great collections around the world in one kind of unified experience. Because as we heard earlier today, kind of the current experience, which is enabled by all this great digitization and all this great software, is to see the first painting by Rembrandt, one would have to go to the Rijksmuseum website, which is a beautiful website, but figure out how to use it, presumably convert the language to English, then figure out how to go ahead and download the beautiful open access files, and then for the second image, come to the National Gallery of Art's website, do the same thing, download the files, then go to the Metropolitan Museum, New York, their website. It's another great website, but it's another thing to learn. And then maybe you've downloaded these to your desktop, and you've loaded them up in Photoshop. You've opened up Microsoft Word on the side to take some notes and annotations. And this has been the state of play for a while. And now we can imagine, and actually we don't need to imagine because we've seen it earlier this morning, a viewer that brings those three images together in a common workspace. That would allow me to zoom into them deeply, importantly to compare them side by side or in any arrangement that I'd like, annotate them with notes and research and experiences, and then share that state of that view, of that comparison with those annotations with our students or our research colleagues that we want to work with. So this is the premise of Mirador, which you've heard. We're now in version 2. So the instance that you saw Yale demonstrate to great effect was the first instance, and we've come a long way since then. Some new features I hope they'll be excited about that we'd like to show. So we are going to now tempt the demo gods and move into live demo mode. And Drew, who is one of the lead developers on Mirador 2, is going to drive while I try to talk through the workspace. So starting with an empty workspace, you can actually see this big plus button and a list of available objects you can add to your workspace. And one of the important things to note, the logo is to the left of each object. We are pulling items in from all over the world. The Ecodices project, which hosts medieval manuscripts from the Library of St. Gall in Switzerland, a large number of objects coming from the Harvard Library, and then also Yale, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the National Library of Wales. So we have accessible to us a variety of objects from around the world because each of these institutions has adopted and implemented a IIIF-compatible image server and presentation API. So from this window, I can actually filter objects if it's a long list by title or metadata, or if I knew the URL for a IIIF manifest, I could copy it in there and add it. That's not something that most end users would know, but it's a possibility for those who do. So we'll start by opening up a 15th century manuscript that was digitized by the Harvard University Libraries. It's one of our great demo books. And you notice immediately the main window allows you to do deep zoom and pan using OpenSeaDragon as the library that allows you to do that kind of smooth, deep zoom and pan these beautiful images. And I can paginate. I have buttons that allow me to paginate to go left and right if I want to scroll through the object. I also have a couple of other modes of navigation available to me. So, for example, you see below, I have a film strip that I can click on individual pages. If the labels are encoded in the metadata and they're available, the labels show below, and you see the object kind of transitioning in the window. On the left side, we also see, kind of moving along with a thumbnail strip, a table of contents. So in some cases, we have created deep structural data about an object, for example, a table of contents, but not exclusively a table of contents. And if you have that available to you, it generates a table of contents on the left. And as you navigate with any of these different modes, each one stays synchronized. One other thing that you can do is you can go to full screen. So there's full screen capability. And we can also hide the table of contents and the film strip for kind of full visibility. A couple of other modes that are available for viewing. There's a full thumbnail gallery that fills the main page, that makes it easier to browse through a rather large object to find the item that you like or the page that you like quickly. And then a couple other specialized modes. This is, for example, this is of course a book, and many folks would like to see the book in its two-page format as it exists in real life and do the page turning action. So we can spread it out in two-page view, and then when we zoom, it's actually zooming in on the two-page spread. For items where we might not so happen to know the left and right, the recto and verso, there's something called horizontal scroll, which puts the images side by side, evenly situated, so you can scroll across and find the openings, and just a different way. We're trying to offer a variety of ways to find images. Okay, so ever important metadata. So if we click on the information icon in the upper right-hand corner, we can see, typically this can be as in-depth or not, and Rob will talk a little bit about that, but it will typically often also include a link to the detailed metadata at the host institution. And we've talked a lot about books and manuscripts. Mirador is not exclusively built for books and manuscripts. We have a variety of different formats available. We've got some sculpture and some painting, and our lovely apostle that we've seen in some title slides. So we can look at a variety of objects in this way. Now, one other thing, if we call back up the Richardson book, and you notice that Drew's working on this little menu in the upper left-hand corner that allows him to swap out the images and objects that are available to him. One other aspect that, while we're still in the single view, I want to talk about is this ability to annotate. So Mirador now includes increasingly sophisticated annotation tools. So you're now seeing a page that already has some rectangular regions drawn and some annotations produced. So on hover, you can see those annotations. We can also create annotations in annotation mode. So if we click on we can edit annotations. You'll notice there's a little toolbar that suggests WYSIWYG for the annotations. And we can also annotate a region with multimedia. So for example, we could put a YouTube video in the annotation, and you can imagine a faculty member who's giving a lecture on a book, and or a part of a page, and that YouTube video playing as you hover over the region of the book. So pretty sophisticated stuff. So so the real power of Mirador, and again that motivated use case, is the ability to compare images and objects from around the world. So you notice in the upper left-hand corner, we can start adding slots to configure a comparison workspace. So I can create a simple 2x2 or 1x2, so a side-by-side comparison, so I can look at different pages from the same book or different pages from different book, and I can zoom them independently in each side. Using the same menu, I can actually make this workspace as arbitrarily complex as I want. So some increasingly sophisticated comparison views of different objects on my workspace. If you want to create simpler grids, so some kind of pre-baked layout, so I can do a 2x2, a 3x3, a 4x4, a 2x5, and it'll organize your workspace in a more symmetrical view if that's your thing. And then once I've got my workspace laid out with my objects selected, my zoom levels set, I can then bookmark the workspace, which creates a stable URL that I can then use to send to my students or to a research colleague so they can look at the same view that I've just seen. And we also have the ability to embed this view in a blog post or an external website with some of these sharing capabilities. So that's and we'll see an example of embeddedness on the Project Mirador homepage. So that's the lightning tour of Mirador. I'm going to switch quickly to did I forget anything? Did we get everything? Mm-hmm. Right on. So I'm going to switch back to, you're right, the browser is small. Presentation mode. So we talked about some of the use cases that Mirador supports, some in-depth comparison. We'll hear in a little bit about applications of Mirador in instruction. One of my favorite use cases for Mirador and IIIF is this notion of reunification. So either books that have been disbound and their parts sold and distributed around the world, or pieces of objects that have been cut out of manuscripts and distributed around the world, and they have been scanned by their host institutions. But now this is a tool, for example, that would allow us to reunify those items. Annotation and transcription. So Mirador 2.0 is open source, and it's already been built by a thriving community. Many of the people who've contributed to Mirador in the room. It's based on JavaScript and HTML5. It's fairly extensible. It's interoperable in its ability to take advantage of IIIF sources around the world. And it is compatible with the Open Annotation Framework. So it's adopting an open standard for annotation creation and storage as well, and I think Rob might talk a little bit about that during the presentation API. So it's very much standards-based. So we've heard throughout the day a little bit about the roadmap and what's coming. There's a lot coming. We've got a pull request right now, or a contribution to the project to add transparency controls and brightness and contrast, which is very exciting. Yale is also working on internationalizing the interface to support Chinese, Japanese, Korean, but also building out the framework so we can support any language that we can translate it to. A dynamic ruler so that you can generate a changeable ruler, so as you zoom and pan, you can measure things if you have the accurate measurements. Transcription tools, and we're always trying to make it more friendly for mobile and responsive devices. So we encourage contribution, and you can kind of go to the projectmirador.org website, check us out. If you're a developer in the room, we are always soliciting new developers to contribute to the project. You can track our progress at Mirador Tech at Google Groups. I want to quickly acknowledge, as I said, there are a lot of people in the room who have worked on this and contributed to this. The push for Mirador 2 was primarily developed by Drew from Stanford and Rashmi Singhal from Harvard University is here, and they've done a really great job. And now we're at a moment where we really want to encourage you to give it a try, give us some feedback, and help us make it better. So that is Mirador, and I'm over time. Thank you.